All right, this is David Mills. I'm making this video as a kind of process video for anyone who's either new to OMG and wanting to learn the SEO, search engine optimization angle of it, or if you've been struggling at all or feel like you're struggling and you want help with what you might feel like are the basics and so forth, then this is going to be a very helpful video for you. I'll be giving you a process that will inevitably lead to your success in understanding and mastering search engine optimization, and I'll go into a few details about SEO and also our members area as well. But primarily, I'm going to be showing you a process that people typically aren't aware of. The reason I'm aware of it is I spent about a decade focused on teaching accelerated learning. And I did that myself as my own business, my own information business before the internet was big. And I didn't do it on the internet, I did it in person. People came back, it was a multi-week course. And so people had to come back, there were college students who have to come back on their voluntarily, essentially, week after week. And so I got used to needing to get results for people. I'm also a curious person, so I read a lot, and then I developed a lot on top of that, past reading, anything I can get my hands on. And so what I have for you is quite rare and unique information. It's not going to be like particularly necessarily shocking or anything, but it's going to be almost certainly different than what you already know. If it seems the same as what you already know, you might be kind of twisting or deleting some of what I'm sharing with you. All right, what I have on this slide is I say that SEO has the illusion of being quite difficult, which is for many people. Obviously, for some people, if they particularly have a bent towards it or a propensity for it, then it may not seem difficult. But for people as a whole, and for business owners who want to have someone else do SEO for them, like you can do for them, then it typically seems like a difficult thing. That illusion is why it continues to be such an amazing money-getting career. And it's been so for well over a decade. Probably more like 2 decades now, where it's been a very, very financially valuable skill to know. Now, it is fairly difficult in a sense. And certainly without Greg and our other coaches, it would be hard to stay on top of it and on top of the little tweaks that Google makes in its algorithm as time goes on. However, given that you have our help, it is very doable. And second, because all you need to do is be able to follow along with what we show you. You don't need to innovate and figure it out from scratch. Secondly, compared to how much money you're going to make with it, it is not difficult. So if it takes you 2 to 6 months to master it or to get very competent with it, then compared to making $10, $20, $50 or more $1,000 a month, that's not a long time at all. But there is a difficulty to it for sure. I mean, that's why we have a lot of videos and ongoing question and answer. And we have a big program around the SEO part of what we show you at in OMG. So I'm not telling you it's easy. That would be incorrect and insulting. But it still, no matter how hard it is, it looks way harder than it is. And again, given that you're in OMG and you have our help, then compared to the kind of money you can make, it is a great opportunity that is not going to be too difficult for you. Because on top of all the direct training you have, you also now have me and what I'm explaining in this video, which should put you completely over the edge in a good way with being able to put it all together for yourself. Also, I want to point out that a coaching program or any kind of one-on-one coaching or whatever, any kind of where someone's selling some type of coaching program like we are, it can involve different ways of doing things. The way that was originally presented to us when we were doing an infomercial, and then the idea was to make money off selling high-dollar coaching on the back end, was more of like a curriculum walkthrough where I hired people whose job it was to be coaches, where they made like a little bit of money as like a salary being a coach. And that was their only exposure to the material. Would be given a curriculum by someone like Mike Long, or Greg or something. And then the coach would walk coaching members through it and do phone calls and so forth, which they'd also provide, some motivation or things like that. So we definitely do things to help motivate you. Part of what ends up happening, Cotton did a webinar just recently. I'm recording this on a Sunday, August 16th. And so on the previous Wednesday, August 12th, Cotton did a great webinar with several other OMGers who are doing very, very well, around the 50,000 or more mark a month. And they were sharing, and the idea of the webinar was 10 things that are keeping you from making $30,000 a month with OMG. And so that sort of thing, and other places, and places I cover the topic of motivation, and I help motivate you as well with some of my law of implication stuff. So we do have some motivation, but what we most are organized around is what we might call guided navigation. And because I have reasons, and they might be fairly obvious, I might be able to it might make sense just as I describe it. But in navigating reality and trying to make money, then you really want this type of program, as opposed to, for example, people. It might be good on a sales letter to say, "We hold your hand every step of the way. It's all step by step," but reality isn't exactly step by step. If you were tasked with showing hundreds of people how to make money, then if you were to try to write like 5 steps or 10 steps or even 100 steps, that each and every person could follow those exact same steps just as you write them, and that they make money, there's a way in which that doesn't really conform to reality. People's situations are different, and also if you give someone a very rigid program where you follow these exact steps, I mean, what do we do? Give you the exact keywords to go after? Everyone try to rank for the same exact term, right? Like, I don't know, New York City SEO, right? It doesn't make sense. So there needs to be a certain openness and flexibility. So there's plenty of step-by-step in OMG wherever it's applicable, how to host a website, how to go about looking for the right private blog network sites, how to set those up safely and carefully, how to set up various social or blog sites, like on Twitter or Blogger or Facebook or something like that, and then how to do the variation of your anchor text. And if you don't know what that means about anchor text, don't worry. I'll actually plan to mention that in this video itself. I'll go over that. But we constantly give step by step. But overall, we're trying to guide you and help you navigate, which is why we have so much question and answer and so many live ongoing webinars. However, we're also a program that is designed to take advantage of the internet. And I want you to be able to find information well. And so you need to look at the live webinars as complementing or supporting the recorded training and not vice versa. When you're starting out, you want to make sure that you're focused in and going through that recorded training. I intentionally don't have us do too much with training, like new training on our webinars, because the problem is, if we teach something on August 13th on a webinar, then it's hard for another person to find a month later where that topic is. And also, if it's recorded, people can, the person who's recording it, the coach, they can prepare and do a particularly good job and so forth. So we record the training as the basis, and then you should start there, and then use the live webinars to complement that, supplement it, certainly by asking questions that come up, including vocabulary words that you don't realize or know what they mean, and so forth. And that's what I mean by navigating, because with helping navigate, it's not like we give you a frozen in time step by step, and then we throw our hands up in the air and say, well, I'll follow those steps. We give you terrific training, and then we kind of walk side by side with you while you, and as questions come up, we're there to answer them. We do give you like secrets, right? In the sense of you'll learn things in OMG that you're generally not going to learn other places, but we're less. It's less important that we give you secrets and things that are particularly clever than that we give you what really people are doing, like really what Greg is doing. What I want is Greg to show you what he's doing, not for Greg to figure out some super clever secret that maybe is like a little. Takes advantage of something that Google didn't realize, but then Google realizes it and fixes it and closes up that little loophole, right? So again, we have plenty of secrets. I have no problem having wonderful secrets in OMG, but even more important than that, I want Greg and others to show you what they're doing and then help you navigate through it on your own path. So everyone's not on the exact same path, but we're all in the same framework. And our coaches help guide you along your path. And again, all within very, very much the same framework. Now, I'm not talking about our whole Amazon angle here. That, I think, is Amazon doesn't really exactly have the illusion of being difficult in the same way. And so I'm particularly making this video for the SEO aspect of OMG. Another thing you can do is just fully focus instead first on Amazon if that appeals to you more. But I'm not encouraging you to do that or to not do it. But again, I'm just working on the assumption that you want to master search engine optimization either side by side with Amazon or primarily instead of doing Amazon. One other thing about step-by-step hand-holding is that at some point, there's just not in real life, there's not a possibility of having someone who's making $100,000 a month or $500,000 a month and having them just babysit you all the time, right? That's not realistic. And so, again, part of what OMG is from my perspective, is how do I get that kind of perfect, balance or critical point or intersection, like between putting our coaches in the best possible situation to not get burnt out and to share with you what they're really doing and to answer all the questions that come up and do the training that they do while keeping it realistic, right? So I want them to do that without getting burnt out. And so once in a blue moon, someone will say, well, I wish Greg could just get on the phone with me, and so forth. But there's no real world possibility where that's going to happen. And so OMG is my best attempt at a reality that maximizes your advantages, an overwhelming advantage for you to become successful. So in a fantasy ideal world, Greg would, pack up his bags, move into your house and sit there with you for the next year and walk you through everything, personally. But of course, that exact thing can't happen. Okay, on to this slide about process. All right, this is important. Pay close attention here. It's going to be a little bit different, but importantly different than what we'll tend to do by default when we're trying to learn something. And particularly if you're struggling at all, then what you might have done is in your career and in school, you might have dealt with topics where you didn't need to know what I'm about to show you because they were particularly easy topics for your brain to do this process without you helping it along. But with search engine optimization, it's technical enough that that someone who isn't used to how your brain deals with stuff like this, where it's technical and it doesn't just immediately fall off the page as you're learning it. All right. So if you so let me read what's on here. To learn SEO, if you're new, your brain needs to assemble a framework. I write that because there's this question that people have, or assumptions that people make about details versus the whole picture, And people will say, well, I don't want to continue until till I understand the details. They might say they're very detail oriented. Other people say, well, I want to see the whole picture first. And this type of issue would come up a lot when I was teaching accelerated learning. And I also took classes where the number of Bachelor of Science and pre-med courses on chemistry and so forth, where you in physics and such, where this would come up, where it wasn't the same as I went to University of Virginia. There's a commerce school there that is pretty hard to get into, and the people feel like it's very competitive and difficult. But conceptually, it's a complete joke. And I took some courses in that. I didn't go into that whole program. I didn't apply to it, or of course I didn't apply. I didn't get in either because I didn't apply. But I took some courses, like I took an entrepreneurship course and I took a business law course. And it's this prestigious undergraduate business program. And I was taking business law, and halfway through the semester, it was by far the easiest course I'd ever could imagine, compared to taking like organic chemistry and biochemistry and Bachelor of Science Chemistry 101 and so forth. Just conceptually, because it's not it immediately you understand everything they're talking about. You just have to memorize a bunch of details. But halfway through the semester, he said, "I know this has been hard so far, but it's going to start getting easier." And I don't have in any way my nose up in the air. I relate this story because there are plenty of topics, and it's possible that you spent your whole life on those topics, and that's neither good nor bad. But topics like business law or commercial law or entrepreneurship, anything in that whole business school, where it's all so tangible that you don't even notice that your brain needs to first assemble a framework. If you're taking biochemistry, you'll notice, because nothing makes sense when you first start. So between experiencing the difference for myself and then working with people over a decade, teaching them how to learn very quickly and efficiently, which also involved a lot of research on my part and then development. And I was in a feedback loop with people. Actually, I was teaching it, they were doing it, and I was having to get results. So what's going on is that learning is a two-part process, but the first part is invisible if you're dealing with something that's easily tangible, like in the business school. But when you're dealing with SEO, then that first part is where you can get stuck. And so while your brain is assembling a framework, it's doing a certain task. It's trying to accomplish something, and it treats details differently than it's going to after the framework is assembled. So it's possible that you spent your whole life learning where the framework was already in place, kind of automatically without you even trying. And so you might have spent most of your life in step 2. And so if you've done that and then you're in OMG and you're trying to learn search engine optimization, it can be disorienting for you, because there was a step 1 that kind of happened automatically, effortlessly for you, and so that you didn't even realize it needed to happen. And now you're in a place where that step is not happening automatically. And actually, it even will probably happen automatically, but you feel like something's very wrong because you're used to it happening not only automatically, but instantly. And it might, if it takes a few months, then you feel like you're doing something wrong, or you're confused because you've been successful in life up until this point, and you don't know what's wrong now. And it's nobody's fault. It's not your fault. It's not our fault. It's not SEO's fault. It's just the nature of the topic is different. It's more like, roughly speaking, trying to learn physics or biochemistry. Although basically biochemistry is harder and you get far less money if you learn it. And plus you have me to explain this to you. And so you won't have much of a problem once you get what I'm saying. All right. And then I wrote, parenthetically down here, I wrote, people mistakenly think that their brain is trying to absorb new information. It's not exactly trying to absorb it. What it's trying to do, it's trying to fit some, and I'll explain why I said some of it's trying to fit new information into a framework. So learning is not really a process of absorption. It's more of a process of fitting, all right, fitting into a framework. In the past, you may have done topics, like I've said, where the framework happened kind of instantly and automatically. If I take a course on entrepreneurship, I can instantly picture the general framework of what's going on, right? Like if someone comes in from, we had a guy come into our class from that had a mailboxes, etc. franchise, and then he started talking to us, and you know, whatever. And so I could easily picture that he had a brick and mortar store and what a mailbox, etc. franchise looked like roughly, and so forth, right? So it was all that framework was instantly in place the minute he opened his mouth. It was already there. When Greg starts talking about SEO, that might not be the case for you. And so it's a different experience. It can feel, the idea that you're just absorbing new information, it's an approximation that works if the framework is instant and automatic. But when it's not, it's particularly helpful to realize that you're not really absorbing new information when you're learning something. And so it's not like you just watch the OMG videos and absorb through like osmosis. What's going on is new information needs to be fit into and framework is really the perfect word. It's not exactly a core. It's not exactly examples. It's not really the whole picture, right? Because a whole picture is an idea that sort of approximates to a framework, but it can have different meanings. If you were trying to paint a building, then you would need to set up scaffolding, right? And you'd need to have an idea about, you know, what paint was supposed to go where, and then but particularly, let's just think about the scaffolding for a moment. The scaffolding is not the whole picture, right? Exactly, right? It's more of a framework. And so what you're trying to assemble is kind of like a mental model of scaffolding for a particular topic. So by framework, again, I mean a little bit less like whole picture and a little bit more like a whole picture might be a little bit like if you had a jigsaw puzzle, and on the box of a jigsaw puzzle is what it's supposed to look like at the end. Now that if you have something like that, that will give you a bit of a framework. And so again, a whole picture in plenty of cases will be somewhat of a reasonable approximation, or even an exact approximation, depending on the situation or the topic, to a framework. But a whole picture is also kind of implies that all the details are already in place and assembled. And that isn't really going to be realistic or efficient. It's not that you need to get all the details fit into place before you can start. Again, you need something a little bit more like a scaffolding, or else you can't get going. You're going to be stuck. Once the scaffolding is in place, and the next thing I'm going to talk about after this slide is I'm going to talk about how to assemble that scaffolding most effectively. But once the scaffolding is in place, then details will be assembled quite quickly and easily. That's when things are going to seem fairly easy. And sometimes people will say to you, about certain topics that are pretty difficult, they'll be like, oh, it's easy. Well, any topic, no matter how supposedly complex, any topic is easy after you have the scaffolding, the framework, and if you have access to the details. Okay? What makes a topic hard is if the scaffolding is pretty hard for you to assemble for whatever reason. And that can be the case with SEO, but not with the training we have and with what I'm explaining to you now. You should no longer have too much of a problem assembling the scaffolding. It might take you weeks, but you'll know just what you're doing, and you'll just go do it. So again, an easy topic is one where you have the scaffolding, and one way or the other, the framework, and where you have access to the details. Either because you can collect the data yourself, or because, like in the case of OMG, you can do both. Once you get started, you can start assembling your own data, because you'll have your own websites and so forth. But in particular, you'll get so many details from us, from our various coaches who are in the middle of doing this. So what's going on for you if you're trying to learn in SEO, in OMG, if you don't yet have a framework, So I wrote, your brain is trying to fit some of the new information into a framework. And if it doesn't have a framework, it first feels confused, right? So if your brain starts hearing details, but it can't fit them in anywhere because it goes to fit them into a framework, but the framework's not there, then you're going to feel confused. That isn't bad. It's bad, though, if you don't know what's going on. If you understand what's going on, then that's good, the confusion, because that means your brain got the message that it needs to assemble a framework, which is very helpful. So a bit of that feeling of confusion is actually a signal that everything is proceeding properly, as long as you understand what I'm telling you now. And then once it feels confused, it goes into a state of confusion, and then it opens up, kicks into kind of high gear, and it's going to work on assembling a framework. A problem can occur, though, if you don't realize that's what's going on and you panic, and you actually get in the way of your brain doing that. And I'll continue with that. I just want to cover, when I say it's trying to fit some of the new information into a framework, by its nature in dealing with reality, your brain is always inundated or confronted with more information than it's going to memorize. By the way, with memory, your issue with memory is not really so much a one of storage, it's a one of retrieval. And so one way or the other, though, your brain is always deleting most of the information that is coming at it, right? And it's trying to pick and choose what's important. So it's not necessarily trying to fit all of the information into the framework, but it's trying to figure out what's important and fit that into the framework. That issue, though, about importance and too much data or information or details isn't too much of a big deal with an OMG, because pretty much everything in our training is important once you're dealing with that particular topic or if that issue comes up for you and so forth. Although even then, like with so many live webinars, then it's not really realistic to necessarily watch all the replays, right, for the past year and so forth. So still, your brain is trying to figure out what's important, and then if it feels like it is important, then it's trying to fit it in to a framework so it can be understood in terms of the framework and also retrieved later. Okay, I've gone to the next slide. In order to get this framework created, then the first thing is just don't block the process by worrying that details aren't getting fit into a framework before you have a framework. Understand, okay, I don't have a framework. And so you don't need to feel like something's wrong, that you're not operating as if you do. You know you don't have it yet. So then don't block yourself. So then the next thing is, all right, you're like, all right, I'm not going to block myself, so what do I actually do besides not block myself? What you want to do, your brain's really going to assemble the framework pretty automatically, but there's I don't know if you call it a trick or whatever, but it might be counterintuitive for some people. You do actually want to zoom in on details almost at random, because before you have a framework, it's hard to even know what's important. But you can get into detail at certain points. This is also where the kind of whole picture versus detail thing can mislead people, because if someone's like, well, I'm just trying to get an overview, I'm just trying to get a whole picture of what's going on, then that might be one of the angles on getting a framework, is to kind of scan over everything, and that's totally valid. One thing you might do with OMG is just kind of click into the various links and pages and just get a sense of what videos we have, for example, especially like in the free traffic, like the SEO section in general. But that overview, or that quote-unquote view from whatever 40,000 feet or 20,000 feet or something that people talk about, that's only one aspect of assembling the framework. So that's another reason why I use the word framework instead of the word whole picture, or instead of the view from 20,000 feet or something like that. So that's only part of your strategy. It's not the whole strategy. It's not going to work by itself, probably. If it does, great. I mean, if there's a point where everything's fitting together already for you, then you're clearly done with assembling the framework, and all you're doing is happily learning new details, and they're making perfect sense, and you're off to the races. That's great. At that point, it's pretty easy to recognize, especially once I've explained this to you. All right, but separately from that overview, that high-level view, you actually do want to zoom in on some details. And you can kind of do this sort of a little bit at random. You can sort of pick. I mean, you can say, all right, well, I'm interested in this, or I think this will help me. So I don't mean like you fully have to like throw a dart at the computer screen or anything like that. But you don't need to obsess about what if I'm zooming in on the wrong details. Don't worry about that. Just use your best judgment, which is obviously going to be a beginner's judgment if you're a beginner. but just use your best judgment. I'll give you some sense in our members area in a moment of where you might try zooming in on some details, but so do that as well. Zooming in on some details might mean that you go ahead and actually make sure you get a site hosted and get WordPress on there and start trying to just put like a basic post on WordPress, even if you're saying like hello everybody or something like that, just to see how it all works. Make a page, make a post, see what's different. Try making a category in the perhaps, and things like that. Maybe you could watch Martin, Greg's assistant, on his on-page, what he does for on-page strategy. That's the same as what Greg does. You might do that and kind of watch that in detail, maybe that sort of thing. Then you almost certainly want to pick up one or a few personal private blog network sites and get those set up according to and then there'll be a bunch of step-by-step instructions and things to be careful of, setup instructions that are pretty detailed for a private blog network site. At that point, remember, you're not trying to get everything right at this point. You're zooming in order to create a framework. Until you've created a framework, you do not want to be a perfectionist. And I'll explain that. Some people say, oh, I'm a perfectionist. I need to get everything right. I can't go on until I understand these details. Once you understand it's a two-step process, then you're following the process perfectly by not being a quote-unquote perfectionist in the wrong way. Obviously, nobody can be a perfectionist in everything simultaneously in life, right? If I was trying to make sure I had the absolute perfect tone of voice or silky smooth belly voice or whatever while I was doing this recording, then I'd be so obsessed with that. Or maybe if I thought that I had to get a picture of a live video feed of myself while I'm doing this, and I refused to make this video until I had that, that would just be silly and inefficient. There would be no merit to it. It wouldn't make anything better. So no one's a perfectionist about every possibility in life in the first place, right? We only have a certain amount of focus at any one time. So while you're assembling a framework, then you don't want to be worried that you're going to screw something up or anything like that. You're purely getting involved and trying to zoom in on the details in order to start to make sense of it. And when I say make sense of it, I specifically mean, getting that framework assembled. The only failure here regarding setting up some of your own private blog network sites would be a failure to zoom in on the details by doing it in the first place, by trying to do it. You don't fail by doing it imperfectly because you're not trying to, it's after you have the framework assembled that you go for mastery, right? Mastery is where you're integrating details and you're trying to get things particularly right. I mean, mastery might be more than that, but that gives you a sense of it. And that can only come after you have a framework. Trying to go for mastery in any way before you have a framework is exactly wrong. Again, there's no merit to it. It's just purely the wrong strategy. So you can't screw this up except for by not doing it or trying to master or act like you have a framework before you do. Part of what I'll be talking about, I'm recording this on a Sunday. Tomorrow on a Monday, I'm going to be doing a live session for Law of Implication, and I'll be talking about how to set yourself up for, or not set yourself up for failure. I'll be delving into that further. But this is an example of you are setting yourself up for success here. If you set up a couple of private blog network sites according to Greg's instructions, if you're doing it the best you can as an understanding that you're triangulating in on the details in order to assemble a framework of understanding for yourself, then you're setting yourself up for success. You can't fail to do that except for by just not doing it. So that's great. If you also had to do it at a mastery level where everything was done just right, then you're setting yourself up for failure. You're doing something in the wrong order, at the wrong time, where you don't have the context and the preparation in order to do it right. Right? You'd be trying to do step 2 before doing step 1. So this triangulating is a great strategy. And then I wrote here, to aid your brain in constructing its framework, make sure to create ways to interact with the material in a way that involves a sensory feedback loop. It's very important for your brain to have feedback loops going on. And what that means is either auditorially, but coming from you, like you saying something, or kinesthetically, which means like you're moving your hands and touching things, like writing. You can be actually make even index cards. You can have a little stack of a few index cards, and you can write different concepts or steps down for making a private blog network, or just representing the different parts of your SEO strategy, your main money site that you're trying to rank. Maybe you'd write like your keyword research strategy and list some steps for that. And then your private blog network strategy, or you could even have an index card representing private blog network sites, and you have maybe one index card for each site, and then you might have a little arrow, like you could just write the arrow on the index card itself, and then you might have it pointed at a social site that kind of serves as a buffer in between your private blog network links and your money site, and then you have your social site, like a Facebook page or something, or a YouTube video or something, then pointed with a little arrow, again, written on an index card, several different index cards. And then you move the index cards around and you kind of point them in the right place, kind of assemble what's going on that way. You want to suit this to whatever you feel like doing of my list is probably a good enough approximation to what'll suit your personal learning style better. But the 3 places to look are audio, visual, and kinesthetic. Kinesthetic means touching and doing, physical. At some point with SEO, you almost certainly want to be getting on and making actual websites, and you don't need to make them, again, perfectly or at a mastery level. You're doing that at first only to triangulate it on details in order to assemble a framework of understanding. Then you can go back and fix anything later. Don't worry about it. You can, on a piece of notebook paper, or if you like working with graphics on a computer. I find it much easier personally just to write with a pen on a paper. But some people have programs where they like to assemble mind maps on a program on their computer, whatever works for you. If you want to make a visual representation of what's going on. If you, Mike likes to hand copy instructions, or if there's a sales letter that he wants to use as a template for something he's writing, he can hand copy the template sales letter. If there's instructions that Greg lists on our members area, you might hand copy those instructions onto a notebook paper. Something where you are participating in a way where you're seeing, hearing, and or touching or writing or doing something physical with your hands, or manipulating things on a computer on a website that you're making or anything like that. But you need to be interacting with the information in order to start getting that framework assembled, and then you'll keep going and interact further in order to create mastery as well. So this whole interaction of a sensory feedback loop is you want to have as part of your learning process always, both on the way to the framework and then after the framework, when you're consolidating, assimilating details, and going. I'm not sure if I'm repeating myself, but then you're going for mastery at that point, and integration, and you're building more and more details and pieces of knowledge and so forth. A little bit like plugins, if you know how those work on a WordPress site. You just kind of, once you have the framework, like WordPress itself is like a framework for interacting with a website and putting stuff on a website, and then you can, not only is it a framework for putting words and images on a website, but also there's computer software that plugs in to WordPress and adds additional functionality in many different ways. So that's a little bit of a metaphorical representation or a parallel representation of what you're doing when you're learning. Your framework of understanding for SEO will serve as like your own personal little WordPress, and then you'll add more knowledge as kind of like plugins and so forth that can go. But you can't put plugins and you can't put images and words on a website until you first have WordPress on it, or unless you have a different method. I post stuff onto our OMG Machines members area. I don't use WordPress for our members area. So of course it's not the only possible way to post on a website, but I have my own framework for how I do it. And unless I had that framework, I couldn't put anything on a website. So that's a little bit of a parallel or metaphor that can help you understand what it's like when you're learning. if someone were to think something's wrong, that they can't put a plugin on their website, and then someone said, hey, well, you need to put WordPress on there first because the plugin plugs into WordPress. Same thing with your learning. You can't assemble a detail until you have a framework. What's going to be happening sometimes when you're listening to somebody talk, in this case, we're using SEO, learning SEO is the topic, but this obviously applies to any difficult or topic where you don't have a framework. And they're going to start using vocabulary words that you might not be familiar with. And so you are going to want to, of course, write down those words. And what your brain is going to go into a state of confusion if you start to stack. If someone says a word like Ahrefs or anchor text, or look up your backlinks, and you're not quite sure what that means or how to go about doing that, and then if that coach proceeds onward, assuming that was clear, and then they base the next thing that they're saying based on what they previously said that was blurry already for you, then you're rapidly the possibilities are going to stack up and multiply, and your brain's going to kind of go into a state of confusion, and you're going to want to it's going to be bothersome to you, and it's not efficient. If that kind of thing is going on, then go back to remembering what I'm teaching you here. First the question is, do you have a framework? Now, it could be that you have a framework, but they're still using a number of vocabulary words you don't know. In that case, you just need to write, for that session, you need to write down the vocabulary words. You need to accept that you're not really going to follow what they said. And so you'll have the recording or something. The first go through of that presentation that they're doing, if there's a number of vocabulary words or concepts that you aren't familiar with, then you just write those down, go get the answers to what those are, and then rewatch or re-experience, go back through that recording, or if it's a live webinar, you can watch the recording. But just accept it and realize there's nothing you can do. If there's a bunch of vocabulary, that what you can do is exactly what I said. There is something you can do, but it's a process where you first need to fill in some of those vocabulary words or kind of concepts. It's not always just vocabulary words. It might be a concept. And you need to get a sense of what that is before first, and then you go back through and listen and follow what they're saying after that. So you can have a notebook and you can write down vocabulary words that come up that you're not familiar with if you're new, either from a recording or a live webinar or whatever. Now, that's a little bit separate, like kind of a separate parallel track to the idea that you need to have a framework. If you don't have a framework, you need the framework regardless of vocabulary words. You're not really going to understand vocabulary words very well without a framework, right? Once you have a framework, there's still going to be everything kind of starts there. It doesn't stop when you have a framework. Another mistake people make is, and I'm not saying they make it in OMG, but people make this mistake in school, is that once you assemble a framework, you're like, okay, I've got it. But all you have at that point is a framework. It'd be like if you set up scaffolding to paint a building, and then you're like, all right, we're done. The building's painted. So once you have the framework, then the whole process of mastery and integration and assimilating details begins at that point. It doesn't end at that point. You might look back and feel like, wow, I've forgotten all the details. That is true, because you can't, it's not exactly that you forgot, but think about it logically, until you have a framework, details can't be assembled, they can't be integrated, they can't be attached, right? And so it will be like you've forgotten the details, but that didn't mean that it wasn't useful going over the details. Like when you're triangulating in, and realistically, you'll still remember some stuff. I'm not saying that you'll have a total amnesia, but there'll be a sense like the details got lost. But the details were used wonderfully, but they were used to assemble the framework or to figure out the framework. And the framework is not composed of details. The details are used to figure out what the framework is. It's a little bit different than building the framework out of the details themselves. Like the details sort of imply the framework. The details don't exactly make up the framework. So a lot of the details are going to be lost at first, but it was completely useful and exactly right for you to go over the details and zoom in on some of the details, because, again, assembling the framework first is exactly the right thing. then you'll feel like you don't remember a lot of stuff, and that's normal, and that's exactly what you should expect. And then you get the whole process of mastery after that, and you're in great shape. Everything's happening perfectly. So putting those two things together with this vocabulary word blurriness stacking thing, that means that before you've assembled a framework, it's still good to notice vocabulary words that you don't know and look them up and get the answers to them. But before you assemble the framework, why are you doing that? You're doing it as part of your process for assembling the framework. After you've gotten the framework, then you might need to look those exact same vocabulary words back up in some cases. In some cases, you might remember, but in other cases, you might forget. And once you have a framework, then you are assimilating the vocabulary words in a different way. Well, they'll be remembered and integrated better. But the rule about that you need to make a framework first is still in play. All right, so details before a framework are used to figure out what the framework is. And then details after a framework are used to achieve competence and mastery and to grow and expand your understanding and the breadth of your knowledge and your skill and all that. Okay, that said, let me take a little look at the members area with you and maybe at a few main concepts that might be helpful. Okay, at the top of the menu here, you see here in the orientation section, there's a glossary and an overview page. That's we put a good amount of work into this. I don't mean like a sob story here or something, but there's a bunch of great resources for the basics here, and things like anchor text, which is not a word everyone's familiar with if they're just starting out with us, but Mike explains it well here. And then there's some, you can even click in, don't miss these pages here, where you can click in and get even more information on some topics. So I want to make sure you're aware of that glossary page. At some point, by the way, you might want to click into the news archive and just give you a sense of some things that might bring some things to your attention, but that isn't really something you need to worry about when you're new. Certainly, you should be aware of the coaching webinar schedule page. But remember that the live webinars, it's going to be great to get on them as time permits for you, for sure. But don't let them worry you in the sense that if they are covering or people are asking questions and they might not be the most efficient thing for helping you get a framework, you'll want to feel a sense of being part of something real and vibrant and live. And so it's really nice to have that live interaction, for sure. But make sure that you're focusing on the training, and that certainly if someone was just watching live webinars, then it would take them probably a very long time, if ever, to assemble all the basics and the framework that they need. You have to use our recorded training for that. Now, okay, in March, I thought it'd be a nice time for us to have a little, what we called March, April, May Mastery event. And I'm going to click into this page here. You don't necessarily need to watch this webinar on the front page. It'd be a couple hours. If you're trying to most efficiently get your SEO framework made, then click in. Now, this SEO Agency 101 is pretty great to watch. By the way, Cotton's, I think he's over 500,000 now, over 500,000 a month. So he keeps on zooming up, practicing what he preaches. The 4 pillars of SEO is a great overview on what Greg is currently doing. This is totally current still. This is just same thing he's doing. Greg focuses primarily on 2 of the pillars, so to speak, especially, which is the URLs, anchor text, and titles. If you don't know what those are, you can look in the glossary and you can watch this and you can watch his other training on this. But never lose sight of the fact that you're first trying to get a framework. And that'll happen automatically if you just do what I was saying about zoom in on some details, get an overview, plus zoom in on some details until it makes sense in the sense that that new information feels differently able to be understood. That's when you know you have a framework. If everything feels like it doesn't quite make sense yet, then you still need to assemble the framework. So keep interacting with the material with a feedback loop, sensory feedback loop, zooming in on various details, interacting with the material, as I said, and you can also continue to get an overview of things. And then the private blog network backlinking are particularly the two things that Greg does the most. So you're aware, Network Empire, which is Russell, Sue, and Jimmy, essentially, in terms of the part of that business. That's pretty much the leadership of that business in the first place. But then they're the ones that are in here helping teach some SEO. They have a different angle on SEO that I want you to have available to you to give you more breadth to your knowledge about SEO and so forth. But they actually don't even use private blog network sites themselves. They have a whole method that gets around that. But Greg's method is what you should use as the anchor for things. And then SEO is the type of thing where you want to continue to expand and broaden your knowledge, because it's a little bit like being a doctor. The reason it takes so much training to be a doctor is because if all they had was some quick step-by-step training, then they could fix a bunch of people. But then as soon as something went wrong, then all hell would break loose, right? Same thing with SEO. You ultimately want to have a nice breadth of understanding, but you don't need to worry about that yet. You can just purely copy what Greg does and do extremely well right now. And so you can watch these 3 videos. Now remember, at first, it's not about understanding everything as if you already had the framework, but this will be a pretty great place to zoom in on the details in order to have a good chance of a great piece of assembling the framework for yourself. A framework of understanding isn't the kind of thing that can be directly transferred from one person to another, like we're handing on a silver platter the framework, because our brain assembles a framework from a bunch of more details than that. And so by designing OMG in the way that I did, I'm giving you the best ability to assemble the framework for yourself, which is the only way it can actually be done effectively. Okay, I click back into the main page here. I'm scrolling back down again past the March Mastery. This is my law of implication stuff, of course. That's separate from SEO. So let's go down to the SEO. As I record this on August 16th, the SEO intro and update section doesn't have anything particularly new, but there's a kind of a 2015 overview that Greg did on the main page here that is very possibly a nice additional place where you can go to start making sense of things. Let me click in here. Oh, and on top of that is a update about mobile phones that is a kind of a bit of it's a detail that ultimately is important. You want to be aware of it. That may or may not be the first place you need to focus. But Greg's January overview is it can be a pretty great place. Okay, I'll go back on the main menu, scrolling back down. All right, I want you to be aware of this step-by-step website setup with Daryl Ferguson. He made this to particularly help people with very basic information. Now, hosting. I want to draw your attention to this. If you click into the hosting, and then if we go to, you can read this here. It's going to be helpful on the main page. This hosting training update and overview might actually not be that critical. Just read what's on this page. Eventually, it's useful to watch, but I'm just trying to think about where you want to start here. All the information on OMG is really awesome, so I'm not saying what's good and what isn't good. I'm trying to think where you want to start and where you don't necessarily want to start. This helpful hosting list, however, is big. And this page is very important. I clicked into hosting, and then I clicked into these helpful hosting list. And then this is all these $1 hosting places. These days, we don't really use... Greg, a while ago, a year ago or more, he had his private sites, his private blog network sites hosted on what's called like SEO hosting, where you, with one kind of account at a hosting service, you can have a lot of different websites all on kind of one general account, one back office. And he's gotten away from that because these days it's more expensive and more risky. So now instead we use this kind of cheap shared hosting for these private blog network sites. To start with, as you're trying to make sense out of things, you just want to get, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 5, somewhere in that neighborhood of private blog network sites and get them set up. In terms of your main website, then one good place to start is with your city or a nearby city that's totally can be your city. If your city even has 20,000 people in it or 30,000 people, that's plenty. Or you can do like the major city nearby, whatever, and do your city SEO, .com, .net, .org, or add one word onto there. All right, any word you want. Could be like your name, it could be expert, it could be consulting, it could be SEO and web design as the domain name. For your money, a money site is a site where you want human visitors to come and perform some action that's going to lead to you making money. In this case, the action would be a business types in the city that you live in, Nashville, whatever, SEO into Google, and your website comes up somewhere and they call you. And you go from there. And from there, you can follow Cotton's, walks you exactly through what to put on your website and then what to say when they call. And he does that in his Agency 101. And he does that in the March Mastery. He also does that in, if you go all the way down to on the main menu to the coaching section and you click into his name, that's where all the replays are. But he also has some training there about client getting. Actually, in the client monetization area also. Let me show you. If you scroll all the way down past free traffic, then you get to the idea of monetizing. One very great thing about OMG is it's not just that you have like professor types who are doing research in this area, but you have people who mainly want our career to make money, not just we don't just want experts or people in ivory towers. Everyone, obviously the coaches in OMG are making money. They're making a lot of it. And so it's all about monetizing your skill. You're developing a skill, and you're developing a skill totally integrated with the idea of monetizing that skill from the beginning. So it's and here, Cotton Grammar's client getting is in deciding on your game plan, the monetization area under free traffic. So you can be aware of that. And the other people have great stuff on this too. You can delve into this to the extent that you want to. If you're impatient to make SEO work for yourself, then don't spend too much time on this for right now, and you'll do it a little bit later. Or if you like to know where you're heading and you want to begin more with the end in mind, then you can delve into more of this, how to monetize your sites. Of course, you don't need to only do client consulting. You could do affiliate stuff, and we have terrific training on that too. Again, always from people that are doing it and making money with doing it, and a lot of money. All right, I'm scrolling back up through the free traffic section. So there's your hosting. Now here, this demo is amazing. This over-the-shoulder training where they show how they rank Iowa City SEO.net. If you go and type in Iowa City SEO into Google, like I did here, sorry, I'll move it down here. Let's see if I can get this. There you go. You can see that I typed in Iowa City SEO. And then there's some ads, but then I think this is us here in this picture. But Iowa City SEO.net, it's us, is number one. And then number two is the YouTube video. And then Facebook is the third. And so Yelp. And then down here, this is us too. We set this up like number 6 or so, and it goes on from there. So clearly, Greg and Joe Marfolia, who did this, know what they're doing. Fletch also set up the web design on there, and he walks you through that. So we have like every moment they spent doing that is on video. So how amazing is that? And that's another great example of triangulating in on details. And then part of coaching is not just motivation like I listed, but also the idea of, is it real? Part of what a coach can do for you is trailblaze for you, where you get a sense that this is real, right? And I just went on Real Google and showed you that it's all so incredibly real. And then they just walk and do this. They walk you through this and do this right in front of you. You can watch when this is before the site was ranked. These videos. This is while they were working on the site before it ever got ranked. All these videos, if I clicked in here. So that's an amazing section, and it's a great place to kind of triangulate in to develop a framework of what's going on. Remember that the details are going to kind of fly by you or feel like, whoa, I don't know how to do this, I don't know how to do that. Now that I've explained all this, to hopefully understand that's normal, that's what you should expect. but it's a terrific triangulation to assemble a framework about what's going on. If you'd like, wait, while I'm going through here, there's a 2014 demo. You can look at that if you'd like. YouTube is sort of like a standalone. So if you feel ever particularly stuck with trying to rank websites or understand how to rank websites, then you can follow some of the YouTube instructions that are more encapsulated. They're more standalone and kind of smaller. There's less to learn. That's not necessarily better, but if that appeals to you, then we have that. I could have also put this more down below because it kind of breaks up the flow here a little bit by having this sitting here in the middle. It's kind of a tangent in a sense. It's all very much related, so this will help you. If it appeals to you, it'll help you assemble an overall understanding of SEO in general. It won't take you in the wrong direction. But whether it's the most bang for your buck on the time that you're going to spend if you want to learn how to rank websites, it's hard to say. As I say, with triangulating in, going into some details, then you a little bit have to pick at random. You kind of have to just use your judgment, and your judgment is not going to be perfect because who knows? We don't know enough to know what would be the best possible things to watch first. I've organized SEO training, our SEO training, into 4 pillars, 4 angles or not angles but parts, and so here they are. After the 3rd pillar, we have OMG Command Center training. It's perfectly reasonable to get OMG Command Center as a beginner. Normally, I say get software after you know you need it. Command Center will allow you to take advantage of so many like online tools and services that would cost several hundreds of dollars if you got them all separately. And it's like $50 a month, I believe. And as I've mentioned before, OMG doesn't make a commission off of that. So we got it for you at rock bottom prices. Just developed, and Colin Clinker, who developed it, is awesome. And then there's also training that you can watch regardless of whether you buy it. That might be helpful as well. And then there's a social network domination here, these days with SEO, you're going to want to have some social sites and big domains like YouTube and so forth in between some of your private blog network links and your money site. That's a bit of a new development over the past 6 months to a year, where that's particularly important to do. The Google My Business listings is another standalone technique, except, but this is also covered on the Over the Shoulder series, except that if you're ranking a local website where one would be expected to have a brick and mortar address, or like a snail mail address, then you're going to want to know enough about this in order to have a listing in this area. I just typed in Nashville locksmith into Google, and first there's some ads, and then there's a map, and then this here is what we're talking about, these citations or local listings, and then these are the normal search terms, where you have the websites. So that's what the local My Business listings refers to, or it's sometimes called citations and so forth. There's standalone teaching on this. I probably these days wouldn't start with this actually, but I would know how to do it, because if you have a website, as I was saying, that would go along with a local business, including if you have an SEO consulting website that's local, then you're going to want to probably have a listing in there, and you could just use your actual normal address for that, for your SEO agency. If anyone's really worried about having their address online, I really wouldn't stress about it too much. If things take off for you, you don't really have to worry when you're starting out, right? No one's going to see your website. If you have the problem where you have so many visitors to your website, then that means you're very successful in the first place, and then you can just go get a different address and change it. Like, what I mean is you can pay for an address in various ways at that point. But I would starting out, I would probably just put your real address on there, I believe. And if it makes you nervous, then you can just pay for an address from the beginning. And then, of course, we have some other topics that you can watch or not watch, depending on your interest and the time that you have, and so forth. Again, all these videos are awesome. I'm only trying to help give you a sense of where to get started, but not a sense of what's good or what isn't. If it wasn't good, I wouldn't have it on here in the first place. Interestingly enough, this little service that Dwayne shows how he uses is another standalone technique that you can do without even knowing much about SEO. So you might want to check into this if that kind of thing is interesting to you. All right, I also, and kind of lastly, want to draw your attention, I'm scrolling down here. I want to draw your attention to near the bottom, under the coaching section. There is this background training section. And this is from videos that we've had. We're about 3 years old as a business and as a program. And so we have some training that you don't want to like follow this step by step in terms of your search engine optimization anymore, because some of it's outdated where things are a little bit changed. For example, Greg will show you how to sign up for SEO hosting, but he doesn't use that these days. There's an over-the-shoulder series done in a way that is with article spinning and so forth that isn't exactly how Greg does it these days. It actually might still work a little bit, but it's not really how he does it, and it's not the most effective technique. But by watching it, then you ask yourself this: if you were an SEO expert 2 years ago, then if you were learning, and then you came out of this members area and you were learning what Greg does now, you'd pick it up really fast, right? So you would still want to learn if you were an SEO expert 2 years ago and you dropped it and you hadn't been doing anything with it for 2 years, and then you joined OMG, you wouldn't just use your old knowledge from 2 years ago because it might not be as effective as the new techniques. But you would rapidly learn the new techniques. And so this background section will kind of simulate that sense. And mostly it's all valid, but I still wouldn't just do it, follow directly, follow step by step what's here. Use the free traffic section for that, and the March Mastery section where Greg goes over what he does now with SEO. But this can be quite helpful. Okay, I'm just going to do a pretty quick thing here at the very end. I remember over 10 years ago, someone was explaining to me about the kind of something to do with an internet business kind of opportunity. It was kind of a personal thing. It wasn't like a release to the public thing, but just a guy that I knew that was an entrepreneur. And I remember I didn't even understand the difference between like the company that hosts your server versus the company like Comcast that delivers the cable connection to the internet, right? So I just thought I would go over some real basics. And if these terms that I've listed here are real obvious to you, then you can just be done now. I'm not going to say anything other than this for the rest of the video. A server your website is basically a bunch of files on a computer that a company like HostGator or many other companies, including all the companies that are listed on that $1 hosting companies. A server company has one or more buildings, and they have a strong internet connection piping into that building. And then in the building, they have little computers, right? I don't know what they look like specifically, if they look like towers, like a PC, or if they look more like a CD player or something like that. But they're computers, and they will host one or more websites. And shared hosting is when a number of different people share the same computer, a server. So again, a server is literally a computer, but not. It's very similar to the computer that you're using, but also has differences. Basically, what a server does, again, it hosts files. It runs programs, because you can put programs on a website on a computer server. So it can run programs to having to do with the website. Store website files. It receives incoming signals when you put in omgmachines.com and into a browser from your home. Then that's going to send a signal to the computer, like out in Utah or somewhere, that has our website on the server, and then it will deliver those files over, Comcast or whoever is delivering your cable service back over to your home computer, and it'll show up on your browser. I also wrote the word IP address here just now. IP address is like that number that's like 123 or 124.78.361.75, right, or something like that. If you put it, so as far as I know, one computer or one mobile phone, I believe, will have an IP address. There might be some stuff with virtual servers and so forth that defies that slightly, and I'm not expert on that. You probably don't need to know that directly to have a framework. On share, you can have more than one domain hosted on a server, on the computer server, and then that would look like if you looked into that server, you would just see different different folders and subfolders, and there'd be like a folder for a whole domain. Now, a domain is different than a URL, right? omgmachines.com is an example of a domain name. Anything that says, let me just type something here. Let's see here. So omgmachines.com is a domain name. If we put the subdomain is when there's something that comes before that. So if we put like I don't actually have this subdomain on there. I don't have any subdomains as far as I know on omgmachines.com. But if you see an address like HTTP, either S or not, S just means secure. Members.omgmachines.com. Then members is called a subdomain. Anything that comes after the .com is, so on a computer server there'll be an actual folder for omgmachines.com. There might be a separate folder, by the way, for www.omgmachines.com. You can have both, and you normally just have both. Usually they're set up automatically, where if you put something in one, it goes in the other. So let's just say, for the sake of argument, there's a folder called omgmachines.com. Then that can be organized into subfolders, just like on your home computer. You can have folders and subfolders, of course. And then you can set up a subfolder inside that's called like blog, right? And you could install WordPress on there. And WordPress is just a bunch of files that all together form a framework for writing stuff on a website. A blog. I didn't even know what a blog is specifically years ago, compared to what's not a blog. It doesn't have to be exactly WordPress, but pretty much they're synonymous these days. But a blog is just a particular format, essentially, on a website. These days, a blog and a website are kind of interchangeable, because nearly every website uses a blog format. And once you have blog software installed on your website, then you can log into like a back office. Basically, if I've installed WordPress files or the WordPress program in this folder here in my website, then I could type in, there'd be a folder called like WP admin, let's say, like stand for WordPress, right, administration. And then if I typed in that, then it would come up with a login, and I log in there, and then you can put stuff on your website. If I had this installed in this /blog folder as opposed to on the main domain, then I couldn't write just on the main domain with WordPress. Everything I put in WordPress would start with omgmachines.com/blog and then go from there. This whole thing here is called a URL. So a URL can be longer than a domain. Domain name is just the base.com or .net or .org or .us and so forth. .info, .biz. That's the domain. Okay. Now a domain you register, right? That way you're the one that owns it, and no one else can obviously own it or overtake it. You do that in a place like Namecheap.com or GoDaddy.com, and in order to register a domain, it has to, of course, not be registered by somebody else. So you register domains, and you serve your website needs to go on a server, and then what you do when you register a domain, you do that with a domain registrar. Then you log into your back office of the domain registrar, like Namecheap.com or GoDaddy, and you point it to the computer the computer's IP that has your server. So you go into like Namecheap, you click in on a particular domain that you own within your account there because you registered it, and then you're going to need to tell it where the computer is in the world that is going to have the files for your domain. So your server can be with HostGator.com. Your domain registration can be with Namecheap. The domain registrars these days, in order to expand their business and make more money, separately tend to have their own hosting service. But then, and that can, if you're new, that can be confusing as to what the difference is. But hopefully I started to give you a sense of the difference. Or ideally, I just fully helped you understand the difference. If you just have a domain registered, like when I registered omgmachines.com, I own that domain, and I can mess around with that domain inside of my domain registrar back office account, but I can't post files onto that domain until I get a server for it. So that domain, there's no one can look at anything. I can't put images or text or do anything about a domain until I separately have it hosted somewhere where the actual files go. The files don't go on Namecheap unless I separately have a server with the domain registrar company. But that's because they have a second separate aspect of their business where they also have servers. All right, so I covered URL. Backlinks are when one website links to another. So if I have omgmachines.com, and then if Forbes.com, which they have not, but if Forbes.com were to write an article about OMG Machines, or if I were to somehow submit an article to them and they posted it on their website, and then it's and if someone clicked on the link on Forbes.com and that took them to omgmachines.com, then from the perspective of omgmachines.com, the clickable link on Forbes would be a backlink for us. Okay. SERP stands for search engine results page, search engine results page, and it just means the Google listings. Like when for a particular term, when I typed in Nashville locksmith or Nashville SEO or Iowa City SEO, then websites came up, right? Results that Google provides. And that entire page, including everything on it, is called the search engine results page. The part of that page that we're normally concerned with is called organic, the organic results or the natural results or the free results or the free listings, whatever. And those are the domains that Google decides to put up based on its algorithm. One thing that might not be obvious and might be a little hard to realize is a pretty simple idea. But there's a point at which something called engagement rank matters in addition to the other things that we talk about in terms of search engine optimization. And that means that once you're in like the top 5 of the first page on Google, then they're keeping track of how long people spend on your website and whether people click into your website and navigate it and so forth. And of course, they're trying to deliver results that humans want. And they want it. And the great way for them to figure that out is they have to use an algorithm to figure out who they put on top to give a try to. But then they can also, I don't even know how this works technologically, but they're able to do it, where they're able to see how long human visitors stay on the page, and whether they interact with the site more or less. And that's going to be important for keeping yourself or climbing up to number 1 or keeping yourself at number 1. You can pop yourself to number 1 for a lot of terms without any of that, but then to stay there and to give yourself an extra advantage, you want to make sure people are engaging with the site as best as you can. Anchor text, this is explained in the glossary pretty well, but if Forbes.com links to omgmachines.com and they say, and the way you can click, let's say there's a whole phrase, it says like best looking guy ever when they're talking about me, and they say go here, right? And that whole thing, best looking guy ever, you can click on it, that whole thing, then the anchor text is what the human sees, best looking guy ever, and then the URL of the text of the link is where people end up when they click on it. What comes into their browser. or whatever, which would be like in my example, omgmachines.com. Okay, finally, Silo. I recently went in a little bit extra organized things in your members area so you could get to these Silo plugins a little bit better. Let me go to our members area. Okay, if I click on Pillar 2 and I go to the website structure main page, then you actually don't necessarily need it. It's totally valid to learn how to do siloing right off the bat, which is a structural organization to a website, all right, to your blog, that has to do with categories and subcategories of topics and keywords that are all related to your main idea of your website. There is some good stuff about this also in the glossary. This is one of those places where, so this is something that Network Empire has been talking about for years, and they're interested in what can I do to cut down on how many backlinks that I have on my website. Google, for a long time, and every indication is they're going to keep going this way, where you need some amount of backlinks in order to rank a site, because it's the kind of the hardest thing to sort of just game, right? Like if there was an exact thing you can put on your website to rank it, for Google to rank it, then people might just know what that is and put it there. So at least with backlinks, it's the kind of thing you have to go out and get and make somehow, some way. At least if someone's making backlinks, then they're paying attention to a decent degree, right? One way or the other. Like from Google's point of view. They've tried experiments where they, like internally, where they try to see how they could do results if they totally didn't have backlinks as part of their algorithm, but it never turns out as well as if they do, even though you can game it either way and kind of cheat, so to speak, either way. Then they have backlinks. But what Network Empire tries to do is see, how do we cut down on the backlinks? How do we do things as efficiently as possible on our page so that we need less backlinks? Greg is interested in that, but he puts less emphasis on that, and he puts more emphasis on getting your backlinks very smart and powerful, and having the right distribution of anchor text and URLs and titles, and that he explains that carefully. Again, there's not like a particularly right answer. Both parties rank very well. And again, I actually recommend that you start with Greg. But just so you understand, at any time you can add your understanding of a silo structure, this organization. And Network Empire has a free silo plugin. I clicked into this Pillar 2 website structure page, right? And they have a free silo plugin, and they have one that you pay a little bit of money for, but it's something like 27 or 37 bucks. And they're always improving and updating these, and I think they have another one that's slightly different functionality coming out pretty soon. I think it's in beta. And there's training on this, and then there's even further training here. And then there's some more things you can put on your website that can further increase the power just from what you do right on the page. So that gives you a sense of where to go to proceed onward with learning about and implementing a silo structure on your website. If you feel stuck with it, you don't need to obsess about it to start with. You can just go to On-Page Tactics with Martin, and that's a terrific place to start. And you can learn this later if you want to, or you can take a crack at it from the beginning and get started particularly right. Either way is valid. All right, I'm going to end this video here, and hopefully this was helpful for you.